Do you read? Are you one of those average Americans that reads one book a year? Does it take you all year to read a book? Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about the importance of reading. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm dating everybody. Randy, what's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Now, I think we might have mentioned before, we're both pretty avid readers. We read quite a bit. So, obviously we have an opinion on this. But,
hmm
why do you think it's just generally, why do you think it's important to read? Just your basic insight here.
There's so many benefits to it, but I think that for me, it's like directed learning or directed focus of my attention. Because, most people are just like receptacles for all the garbage that other people throw at them, generally through social media and news.
Yeah.
And so if you're just like a big garbage receptacle, garbage in, garbage out. But
Mhm.
then if you can read or listen to books nowadays. I mean, audiobooks
Yeah.
are excellent.
Well, that
And
counts as reading too. We should say, I don't want to, I hate when people say that like listening doesn't count. It totally counts. It's the same thing. Like, yeah.
yeah. And so now you can read a lot easier with your ears and you can actually pick and choose what you want as your input. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden you can change your output.
Yeah, it's funny too, because like I read a ton, I know you do. And like I read, but I don't read like it's not all like philosophy and science books and coding books. I read a lot of, fiction. Like I like science fiction and fantasy a lot. And it's funny because I still find that those books, they're great because one, you get experiences of interactions between people. So you do learn about like personal interactions and stuff. You see it on the page, and you get to kind of imagine it. So that helps in your everyday life, I think. You also get to like, there's also philosophy, there's also science in fiction books, there's also, spirituality. I mean, there's all kinds of things happening that you can also get out of it, even if it is a story about like, knights in the, sometime in some quasi world in the past fighting dragons and stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's still these things that human experience to get out of it that I think is really valuable.
Yeah, it's the coolest thing when they do a lot of research in the field and
Yeah.
you actually like learn stuff about it by reading the book or a historical fiction where you actually learn the history, but there's a story woven into it.
Well, I've been
Yeah.
reading this guy recently. This one author I've been on a kick on science fiction. I forget his, I think it's Adrian Tchaikovsky or something, but he was like, or one of the science fiction guys I've been reading recently. I can't remember the name now because it's been a bunch, but he's a scientist. So his books are hard, they're hard science fiction. Like they have a lot of like real scientific based stuff, but then, they go beyond it, obviously, for the story. But like it's cool because like he goes into detail explaining things like quasars and like galaxies and how gravity works and all these things. So you're still learning a lot about, fundamental concepts in physics and stuff while you're reading this. So it's kind of awesome. But it's
Yeah.
presented in a way that's like way easier to digest than like a, physics textbook.
hmm that sounds really cool. Yeah, I mean, we were talking in our other episode a lot about reading, so that kind of gave us the idea for this episode.
Yeah.
But I've been enjoying a lot reading usually before I go to bed, I either read fantasy or science fiction because it's not very complex, it's not hard to read. My mind can wander while I'm reading it, and oftentimes it's like an excellent transition into sleep.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because reading can cover a whole bunch of things. Like before I go to sleep, reading kind of helps guide me into sleep. But then when I wake up, I read for inspiration. And then throughout the day, I read for learning. So like there's all types of different reading that I'm doing, but all of it, I would say, is very beneficial in the
Oh
direction of
yeah.
my life.
Well, I think the other thing too with reading is that people I think overlook is that it's great for building your attention span and actually like learning how to pay attention, like and learning how to like just comprehend and process information, which I think a lot of people lack these days. And it's
Mhm.
really good for like, we both learn a lot on our own and use books for that reason. I think it's a great way to like learn how to teach yourself. While still having a guide, because you have a book of some sort, but like it's just I think it's important. It's also helpful for communication. I mean, learning vocabulary and learning, good sentence structure, all of that's in it.
You make a good point that it is an acquired skill.
Yeah.
So when I was really young, I was not a good reader because I would pick up a book and I would fall asleep. Or I would read books I was not interested in and get really frustrated because I would pick a book based on the cover or something like that or the title, and it was the most boring book, and or I was assigned it by school, which was even worse. And like
Yeah.
so, but reading, I've found it to be an actually acquired skill because like most people, they're like, well, every time I read, I try and fall, or every time I try and read, I fall asleep, or I just don't like books. Like, there's nothing that holds my attention. And it's like, well, number one, these same people who complain that every time they read, they fall asleep, they also complain that they can't fall asleep at night. So it's
Yeah.
like, kill two birds with one stone. Just pick up a book when it's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
And like, but like also for me, I remember when I first started like seriously reading, and it took a good week or two for me to stop falling asleep when I was reading.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, if you're not a reader, I mean, how often do you actually sit down or lay down without a TV on, essentially, or your phone or something?
Yeah.
It's the only time you do it is when you're sleeping. So, like, you're getting into the position where you're ready to sleep. It's like, of course, you fall asleep.
Yeah. And yeah, you have to get used to it. I also think too, it's funny because like that's the other thing with audiobooks now too, is like even if you think you don't have time, like you're probably driving in your car, commuting, those are perfect times to listen to books then, and do it that way instead of like listening to like the radio and stuff, the garbage on there. Like it's just a great way, I think, to do things that are enjoyable but learn. And I think reading is just always beneficial. There's nothing about it that's going to like cause a problem. I don't know, for me personally too, like I like it because it's like it's very like relaxing and good for my mental health, I think. It gives me a chance to like just like not shut out the world, but like take time just for myself. You know what I mean? And like do my own thing. And it's more interactive than like scrolling social media or something. Like, you're making
Mm-hmm.
a choice about what you want to read, you're following a story through to the end. And it feels good to complete a book, it always does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know how we've been talking recently about like hobbies and stuff like that. So for a long time, probably for like 4 or 5 years at this point, I was using like a Kindle e-reader because it's so easy to travel with
Yeah,
books that
it
way.
is.
Like you can
Yeah.
just bring every book you've ever gotten on that little device, and if you want a book, you get it instantly. But I always miss like the tactile sense of a paper book and
Yeah.
this, especially the smell of a new book and all that stuff. So I joined a book club, and one thing that I'm doing that's like my I'm spoiling myself or whatever you want to call it is like actually for books for that book club, I just get the paper book and I just like
That's nice.
I sit down and I enjoy reading the paper book, which is a totally I mean it's an old experience for me, but it for the past 5 years I haven't really had that experience, so it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I generally read too, like digital because it is so easy. And like, when you read a lot too, like, I don't know what I would do with all these books too at some point. Like, at some point you have to put them somewhere or like
You
something.
remember
So
like
it's like,
traveling when you used to read paper books, and especially when you read them fast, you'd go on vacation for 2 weeks and you bring 5 books, and it was like this big, like a foot or two of
dude,
books that you
yeah,
would
I'd
bring
always
with
have a
you.
book bag with just books
Yeah.
because like I knew like if I was taking a plane or something or like traveling, like I knew like okay, I have that much time I can read, X number. Then I want some. Yeah, it's just like it's gotten a lot easier in that sense. I will say like you can even get the Kindle app on your phone, and
Hmm.
even if you don't have a Kindle and use it, and it's fine. So like yeah, there's so many options now. But I agree with you. I do like the paper ones. I miss that and like the physical book, and I particularly like getting those when it's something I'm gonna learn because I can engage with it in a different way. Like I much prefer like if I'm taking notes or something, like doing it, with my hand physically with like a pen rather than
Hmm.
like on my phone or something or on the Kindle, writing, typing out notes that way. I just feel like it's more natural for me and
Hmm.
easier and I retain it more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you bring up a good point about learning and reading because they say the more you learn, the more you earn, and everybody wants to be freaking rich. And if you take a look, two of the richest people out there, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, were both asked if you could have a superpower, what would it be? And they both said the ability to read faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Because knowledge, I mean, think about it, like we talked about too, like making opportunities for ourselves by doing things, right? And like knowledge always expands your opportunities. Because like think about it, you wouldn't there's so many things that you probably don't know about that might be good things for you to do that you have no experience with. And until you start to learn about them, you can't know whether it's something you want to do or not, right? And reading's a great place to start. It's the other thing too people forget is like it's so cheap to buy a book, like, and to engage in something and learn. Like, yeah, you can pay thousands of dollars to have somebody instruct you in a course, but you can also just go out and buy the books and read them yourself and spend like,
And you can even
or you
get
can
a
go to the
free
library.
library
Yeah, that's
card
it.
and get the books for free or the ebooks for free. You can rent them. It's crazy how cheap reading. It's like literally one of the best gifts of living in America is the public library
Oh yeah.
system.
Oh yeah,
And
you can get
nobody
them
takes
directly to
advantage
your
of it.
Kindle. You can get Kindle books through them too.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. And like, what was it? Good Will Hunting? Was that the movie where he said like to the guy, like, you're fancy, but I got the same thing with like 79 cents in late fees or something, like,
Yeah.
go to the library. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is the thing we forget. Like, it's such a good way to explore topics, and you can become so far advanced in a field by just reading 5 books in that area from experts.
Hmm.
You catch up so quickly to where the field's at and everything. It's really cool.
Hmm.
And it's like, and it's a great way, I think, to challenge yourself too. Like I like reading books on like science and stuff that are probably like, you know, arguably probably outside of my wheelhouse a bit in the sense of like I'm not into like the very high end math and stuff I don't know, but like I still comprehend like a lot of it and it's still worthwhile.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that was something that stopped me for a long time was tackling books that I didn't understand everything. Because especially like technical type books, so a lot of computer type books, I would read them up until I didn't understand, and then I would quit. And then eventually, when I just made up my mind that I'm just going to learn this material, eventually I was just like, you know what? If I understand 50%, that's good enough. But either way, I'm just going to go through the whole damn thing. And yeah, it opens up a lot of doors.
Like I said, I think what I don't know if it was just me. I was always lucky in that sense because like philosophy was helpful. Like I even remember like one of the first philosophy books I read, I was in high school. I got Nietzsche's Antichrist. I understood like zero of the entire, but I read the whole thing. And like I remember taking like so many books I would read, like, it would take a while to comprehend what they were talking about. And so a lot of times it's like you feel like you grasp maybe 2 sentences, yet you still read
Mm.
you just keep going and keep trying. And it's a great way to just build up your problem solving skills, your comprehensions, all of that, and that'll always benefit you moving forward in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's for anyone who's interested in reading, who maybe doesn't read, because like we mentioned in the beginning, the average American reads one book per year.
Yes.
And if you want to be exceptional, well, maybe you could double what they do, read 2 books a year. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's also helpful to set goals. Because I
Yeah.
remember as I was building up the number of books that I've read in a year to where now it's kind of just automatic that I read a lot. As I was doing that, I would set goals for myself, like I want to read a certain number of books this year. And then I'd figure out how many books I'd have to read in a month, and then how many books I'd have to read in a week. And it turns out, here's the really cool calculation. For each book that you want to read per year, you need to read on average that many minutes per day. So if you want to read one book a year, that equates to 1 minute of reading per day. If you want to
That
read
makes sense.
two
Yeah.
books, yeah, if you want to read 2 books a year, read 2 minutes a day. And so it's really cool because then you can figure out, like, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to read 12 books this year. Okay, so that's like a
Yeah.
roughly 10-minute a day habit. Where can I fit that in my day? And then
Not
just
hard.
start doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you find the right books too, it's like you don't even have to like schedule time. Like it'll work
Oh yeah.
itself
If you
out. You know what
find
I
the
mean?
right books, you can't put them
Yeah.
down.
No, you can't. And I think for anybody that's trying to get into that doesn't really read, I mean, my recommendation would be to like, find stuff that really interests you. Like, really think about like, what's interest do I want a story? Do I want something fun? Okay, what kind of story am I interested in a certain topic? And then just start exploring. And the one thing I will say I do like even if you don't want to read on a Kindle, you can download the app because you can get free samples. And that's the one thing
Mm-hmm.
I love about it. Like they give you 10, I think it's 10% of the book you get for free to try it out. And it's a great way, like especially now because I read so much, I have a hard time sometimes finding like new
Mm-hmm.
stuff that's like good. And so like I'll read a bunch of samples just to find an author I like or something. And then I'll use
And
that.
and
Yeah.
dude, you can always like maybe not always, but you can generally tell by reading the first chapter if
Yeah.
it's going to be a book that sucks you in. Because like
Yeah.
literally every book that I couldn't put down, by the end of the first chapter, usually within the first page or two, I was just sucked in, and it was
Oh,
like, okay,
yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
yeah, right away. Yeah, if I don't get drawn in within that 10%, I'm not gonna get it. There's no way because
Hmm.
I know I just won't like the book. It's
Yeah.
unlikely.
And
Yeah,
you can do that stuff at the bookstore, at the library.
yeah.
You just take 10 minutes, read a few pages or the first chapter, and if it doesn't speak to you, find another one.
Oh my God, I used to remember when I worked at Borders. This is going back when I was in high school, but oh, the cafe, people used to bring stacks of books over, and then they, like literally
That was
like
me.
20, yeah, and then they'd leaf through them, and then they might leave with one, and then we'd have to put all the books back. But like, point is though, but that's what they were doing, right? They were looking for something that interested them, and this is back before all the digitized stuff, so
Dude,
you have to do it that way.
that was like my dream Saturday or Sunday. I would just go there early in the morning when they opened, and I would just find all the books and magazines that I was interested in, and I would just spend 3, 4 hours until I was hungry. I would do that, and then I would
Yeah,
just go. Wouldn't even buy
and
a single book.
they have all those nice couches set up.
I know.
It was perfect for it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But yeah, reading is cool. It's been good.
That's one of the best things I do, I think, for my mental health, but just everything. Like it's just, and like I said, I think, I think we forget how much like if you like struggle talking to people and stuff and all, reading can be a great way to like see how social interactions can work and stuff, and just like a lot of things you can kind of find in there that are very helpful for everyday life, I think, too.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather, who was one of the smartest people I knew, he told me that reading was very, very good for me. And I didn't believe him because I hated it at the time, but I trusted him enough to like stick at it until I
Yeah,
eventually broke through. And yeah, I would encourage all you guys listening out there that reading is really good for you.
yeah.
And if you don't like it,
Give it a
keep
shot.
trying.
Try audiobooks, and like I mean, and if a book really doesn't interest you, just put it down, you know? And
Hmm.
if it's just hard, that's okay. You can work through it. But like, yeah, I think it's
Yeah, and it's literally just for you. Like it's not to post on social media and say I read this book. It's not so that everybody else can validate you for reading it or think lesser of you because you read a book. I mean, heck, I've read most of the books on Oprah's book list and like,
yeah.
so it's like read whatever does it for you because at the end of the day, that's all that's important.
Well, I think the only person probably that has any idea of how many books I actually read is you.
Mhm.
And maybe Anna has some inkling because she sees me read a lot. But like, yeah, it's like, I don't advertise. Who cares? It's just
Yeah,
funny.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny.
But cool. So I think that's it.
Yeah, you should read. It's good for you. There's so many
Hmm.
benefits, and you can just
Hmm.
open up new doors and opportunities. Give it a
Hmm.
shot.
Yeah.
All right.
Despite what your school teachers tell you that you should read, you should actually read. Just don't read what they assign you.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, dude, I used to always, even in college, like if I didn't like it, I would just read other stuff and just not pay attention to it. Like, because, like, it's just so
Mhm.
tiring to read something you
The
hate. Yeah.
classics are just they need to get rid of them. They're classics for a reason that they're
Some are
just so
good, but not
boring.
all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
They make the
Uh-huh.
weirdest choices, especially for like high school, like the Scarlet Letter and stuff. Like, yeah, it's just
Dude,
not
all of them. There are so many books that could make a huge difference in a high school student's life, but none of those.
like, finances or something, or
Hmm. Yeah, that could
yeah,
be helpful.
something like that. Anyway, but
Hmm.
yeah, so there you have it. Check it out. There's so many things to read. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Listen wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube as well. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Until then, though, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.